here's another example from Chapter 1. This is experiment versus observational study. So, a lot of students, when it came time to doing their project, at the end of the course, it turns out that they didn't quite understand the difference between an experiment or an observational study, so I'm focusing on it a little bit more. So on page 31, question 21, it says a pharmaceutical company would like to see if its new drug will lower high blood pressure. Is this an experiment or observational study? So we have to assume, this might be frustrating for you guys to be assuming things, but assume that because they're a pharmaceutical company, they have two groups of people, some group over here and another group over here. This group gets the drug and this group gets no drug or a placebo, and then they're going to compare blood pressure. I'm drawing you this little experiment to show that they have control in this experiment, and this is an experiment. They're not just witnessing, to see what happens. They're actually going to assign some people the drug, assign other people a placebo, and they're going to measure the difference. And because they have control, the answer is this is an experiment. Okay, so here's an example of a question that was part of a student's project from last term, and it was actually a very good project. So the question was, are people happier in colder climates? And the researchers wanted to measure happiness levels and temperature for people living in different climates. So for each person in different cities, you were going to measure some sort of happiness level, and then you were going to measure the temperature, maybe average temperature of where they were in that city. So the question is this an experiment or an observational study? So this one is an observational study. Why is it an observational study? Because they are not controlling anything, they are merely observing. In order to make this an experiment, you would have to take people and assign them to different places. If you said, this person is going to Canada, and this person, sorry, I kind of spelled Canada weird, Canada, and this other person is going to Hawaii, then that would make it an experiment. If you took people that had equal happiness and you assigned them to different places, then that would be an experiment. But because you're just observing what happens, you're saying, oh look, here's a person living in Canada that has this happiness and this daily temperature. This one is an observational study. And this one, what is the battery life of different cell phones? This is kind of tricky. A student was just going to take a bunch of different cell phones and measure the battery life and compare the actual battery life. So this one, you'd think it could go either way. There are ways you could do an experiment on the battery life, but in this case, she just wanted to measure kind of what she saw. So this one was an observational study. She was just going to simply get a bunch of phones and witness what the battery life was. This one could have been an experiment. A way you could do this as an experiment would be to measure the battery life, for example, and then put the batteries in a different temperature, put them in the refrigerator, and then see what the battery life was. It could have been an experiment, but if you're not controlling anything, if you're not assigning, she didn't assign, like some cell phones were going to, go to different places. There's no control, no assigning anything. Then she's just kind of watching to see what there is. So it became an observational study. So if you have any questions when you're doing your own project about whether or not something is an experiment or an observational study, of course, you can just send me a quick email, ask me a question. I'm happy to discuss it with you. Okay, that's experiments versus observational studies.